Well, hello and welcome to the Inviting Shift Show. Tonight we have Jennifer on, and Jennifer's going to talk about a shift. But before we start, let me introduce myself. I'm Christina Smith. I'm an AHA addict, and I just wrote a book, Inviting Shift. It just came out, so I'm very excited. And so I've been collecting AHAs for my book and for the website and for the blog. And basically what my mission is to help people embrace transition instead of struggling with it so that we can get unstuck or get past things in our lives or get through things, and we can move forward and with a whole new perception, hopefully. And Jennifer's going to tell us about that. Jennifer, welcome. So thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. Woohoo!
Yeah. Jennifer was going to fill in at last minute a couple months ago. And then I got sick. Not only did the speaker get sick, but I got sick too. And she's been very good about holding on and waiting to share this shift. So I'm thankful that she's been patient. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a spiritual mentor and an intuitive teacher, and I help people with developing their intuitive gifts. So I'm all about people opening up to their true selves and realizing the amazing voice that's within them. It's something that I had to go through for myself, for my own self-discovery, and I have discovered that I'm really good at it for helping other people do it too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such an interesting niche, you know what I mean? Like it's such a small, it's not something that you hear about every day, like an empowerment coach or whatever, like even, yeah. So, oh, Michelle, welcome, Michelle. Michelle received my book today. Yay, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. So Jennifer, you had a pretty major shift to share with us. Why don't you share that with us? I'm so excited to hear about it.
Absolutely. So it really happened back in 2010. I had launched my business Live Healthy in 2008, and it was really struggling. My intention with Live Healthy was to inspire people to be proactive about their health. I co-hosted and co-produced a video podcast called Vitamin Junkies. And my co-host was a naturopath, and I was just so on fire about learning about natural ways of living because it was what I was discovering for myself, and I really wanted to connect with other people and inspire other people to do the same thing. We released over 50 episodes, and it was a lot of fun, but it didn't make any money. I didn't have any confidence. I didn't see why anybody would want to listen to me because I wasn't a naturopath. I wasn't a nutritionist. Like I didn't have any sort of designation. I wasn't any kind of formal healthcare practitioner. And I started taking on side projects just to try to make money and make ends meet and just cover the expenses of creating this podcast. And I still loved doing it, but I didn't have the confidence. And I was really beating myself up. And I got to a point where I said, you know what? I just got to stop beating myself up. I am going to give myself the space to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, because I was tired of going to networking events, feeling fake, feeling inauthentic, because I'm just kind of spewing out words of what I do, but not really feeling like I can stand behind it. I would reconnect with colleagues and they'd look at my website and they're like, hey, that looks great. How do you make any money? And so my intention was to make money through advertising in the video podcast. But I only had a few advertisers because I wasn't confident enough in what I was doing to attract more. So something really crazy happened when I surrendered. I remember sitting on my couch in my living room and just saying, okay, universe, whatever you are, I don't know, whoever you are, I don't know if I really believe in a God necessarily or just some sort of higher power, but I give myself the space to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, when my youngest son is in school full time, because I was really only putting like maybe 15, 20 hours at my business. So once I did that, all these crazy synchronicities started to show up. I was at a networking event, and we were all encouraged to really help out each other and exchange services to help in any way we could. And this lady stood up and said, well, I'll do a soul reading if you can help me in my business. And it's like, ooh, a soul reading, that'll help me figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And I remember going to that session, I was shaking. I was crying and I had no idea why. I didn't know what sort of questions I wanted to ask, but I knew it was a really important experience for me. And in the session, so it's an Akashic record reading. And if you're not familiar with what an Akashic record reading is, they say that every soul has a book up in heaven's library. And in this book, it has information about all of your lifetimes, all the possibilities, past, present, future. So you can tap into, why are certain patterns repeating in your life? Why is it stuff from your ancestors? Is it stuff from this lifetime? What's the root cause of it? So if you're having money issues or relationship issues, she can, by looking at this book, tune into that. So I get there. She opens my book. And it's this beautiful leather-bound book, she says. Like, this is what she sees in her mind's eye. A beautiful leather-bound book with gold all around the edges of the paper. And as she opens it up, all these beautiful, colorful birds fly out. And she says, I see you come from a long lineage of healers. And it's like, okay, this woman's right. I know that to be true. My uncle's an energy healer, and he said that there's one in every generation. So, okay, she's pretty good. She says, I see you doing something with your hands, and I see your business changing to incorporate more spirituality. I said, oh, do you see me working with Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer? And she's like, no. Well, you know, it was my
dream. Sure, why
not? She said that I do see you working with your hands and discovering some sort of tool at a trade show. It's like, okay. And that tool becomes a really important part of your journey. And I see you like packing your bags and gathering information sort of and taking that over to Gibraltar. That's where my uncle lives, and connecting with him and sharing information, and then bringing that back home. And I said, do you see me going to Sedona, Arizona? Because that was a really important thing, a trip that I was being drawn to take. She's like, yeah, and that looks like a really significant part of your journey. So after that meeting, she said, go get a deck of oracle cards, tarot cards, and start to pull one each day to help you with making decisions. And at that moment, I was trying to decide. I had 2 contract positions that I'd been offered. One was exactly what I had wanted, so I'd manifested it. It was working part-time, making the pay that I wanted to make, and it gave me summers off with my kids, but I didn't really want to do it. And the other contract was one that I'd taken on for the last couple of years. I said, well, how do I know which one? She's like, just put your hand over each option, and whichever one feels best is the one you should do. I still was tied up in knots. I couldn't figure out what to do because I was so caught up in myself. But then the synchronicities continued happening. And you must be seeing this with all of your guests too, eh, Christina?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, things, little things just fall into place.
Yeah. So I did get that deck of cards, and with the deck, you get this guidebook that tells you how to interpret the cards and other little things you could do with it. It was a fairy deck, and it talked about rose quartz. And so that summer, I went camping with my kids and my husband, and we went to this place called Bancroft, Ontario, and that is the gem capital of Canada. So of all the places across Canada, that's where you would find the most crystals. It's a big mining area. And when we went to that campground, there's a paper that you get when you go to the provincial parks, and it had advertisements from the local businesses. And this business was advertised, the Princess Sodalite Rock Shop. And the rock shop says, come on out and go rock hounding in our backyard. They have this big, huge backyard. And I thought, oh, that'd be great for the kids. Of course, we went there. I ended up getting more rocks than the kids. I found rose quartz, which was talked about in that little book. But something really interesting happened. After being there for about 15 minutes, I felt like I had to run out of there because the energy from the crystals was just overwhelming. And I'd never felt that before. So my journey then, I started to meditate. I did the Deepak Chopra 21-day meditation. Highly recommend it. It's fantastic. I learned about meditation. And then I went to this gem show in the community. And while I was there, I was so pumped and ready to go, but I had to go to the bathroom. And it's like, oh, but I want to just check out a couple of booths. I was so curious about these crystals because they were like speaking to me. And so I heard this voice in my head that said, go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, and outside the bathroom there were these two booths, and one was from a lapidary society, and that's where the people actually go out with the picks and look for rocks. But right next to it, my eye kept getting drawn to the table that was next to it, and that was the Canadian Society of Dowsers. And I started to talk to the lady that was there, and she told me about the organization, and oh, it's really interesting, and oh, but you need to talk to Joan, because Joan is the past president and she's so knowledgeable with dowsing. She'll tell you more about what dowsing is and what a pendulum is and all this stuff. And then Joan arrives, and I look at Joan, and I'm really glad that this other woman talked Joan out, because this isn't really nice to say, but Joan is in her 70s, and I don't know if I would have stopped to talk to her. But I'm so glad I did, because she showed me how she would use a pendulum for healing. And as long as the pendulum would move, the healing was taking place. And then when it would stop, the healing was complete. And she showed me how she would get yes and no answers, how she would pick tarot cards without having a tarot card deck, using the pendulum by the way it swung. She'll know that it's, okay, 1, 2, 3. She would count the card with that. And then I was fascinated by this whole dowsing thing. Then I went through the whole show, and half the booths were spiritually oriented. The other half were more geology oriented, but there's this one lady there, a crystal lotus, and she had picked up this crystal and gave it to me as a gift and said, go make a pendulum out of it. And there I am, holding this crystal in my hand, looking at it on my way out, wondering how the heck am I going to make a pendulum out of this random stone? So I go to say goodbye to Joan, and guess what Joan is making? Pendulums. So she gave me some wire to wrap around that stone, and I made my first pendulum. I went to a goddess retreat while I was that weekend. And while I was there was a woman who had back issues. She wasn't going to come, but she decided to show up anyways. She just didn't really do the yoga aspect of it. And she was lying down in the yoga room at one point, and I said, do you mind if I try something with you? And she said, sure. I'm going to try doing some healing with dowsing. She's like, okay. So I held the pendulum just over her back, and then it started to move. I didn't really know what I was doing, just held the intention that I was doing some sort of healing. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can see I'm physically moving it now in this moment, but it spun around fast like that. And then I said, do you feel anything? She's like, yeah, my back's getting kind of warm. Oh, it's doing something. And then it finally came to a stop, and she was able to move around a little more easily afterwards. So that's when I started to explore spirituality. I went down to Sedona, went on a soul adventure, found out all sorts of amazing things about my own gifts and what I was called to do. It was a challenging time, because here I am getting guided to explore spirituality and feeling like this is something that I'm supposed to do, but also feeling like I needed to hide it, that I needed to be in the closet. And all these crazy insights were coming up, and I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. There was one day where it was March, so I went to Sedona in October of 2010, March 2011. I was standing in my kitchen, just getting stuff ready for dinner, to be ready for dinner later. I was home alone at the time, and I felt this energy come over me. And I had heard about channeling, where you speak words that you're channeling from source, divine, whatever you want to call it. And so I opened my mouth to speak, but no words would come out. So I'd heard about automatic writing, where you channel the information through writing. And I picked up a pen and a paper, and I left my hand heavy because I didn't want to influence what was written. And then it started to move, and these scribbles came out, and I just said, I don't understand this. And then it started to form words, and it looked like the writing with your opposite hand. And it said, the essence of the message was, you're so brave. Like, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to fear. Everything's okay. Just keep going and keep at it. And I had this energy in me, and I made dinner, and my husband said it was the best dinner that night. But at that time, I was also pulling together a group of practitioners to start to kind of host spiritual weekends. So somebody could book through me and then book like 10, maybe not 10, but 2 or 3 sessions with different practitioners. I'd help them find accommodations. And it was similar to what I had experienced in Sedona. But I was really scared about sharing this. So I had created this event called the Burloak Bliss Out to start to create community. And in this energy, I started to use a pendulum to help guide me as to what practitioners to invite into this event. And then I started doing the dowsing more and automatic writing every day. And the messages that I got were just incredible. I would get little insights and it's like, man, is this for real? Is this true? And then I would read a book and the same information would be there. And after a week or two, I got instructions for my own modality. I had gotten up. It was mid to late March. It was 5:55 in the morning. And if you're a fan of Doreen Virtue and her angel messages, that's a time of significant shift. How fitting for our conversation. And I was sitting on the couch. It's pitch black. And I was just setting my intentions for the day. And I had a very bizarre experience where I felt like something was making an incision in my stomach from my sternum down past my belly button and poking around in my belly. It's like, okay. And then a moment later, I felt like something poking around my head between my skull and my brain all around the perimeter. It's like, all right. And then I sat down to write and it's like, what was that? And the message I got was, we were unlocking the door to your soul. It had actually been unlocked the whole time, but you just didn't have the courage to let it out. And for the head, we were making room for the ego for when it's displaced by your soul. And it was really weird that morning. I was talking like this. Boys, do not bother each other. Now, if you can't stop bickering, then presently go up to your room. And my kids are looking at me like, what is up with you? And I was really kind of floaty and ungrounded for about a week. And just kept getting all these crazy insights. And then through the writing, I was told that I was going to be facilitating this work, doing the same thing that I experienced for others, connecting them with their soul. And I was given instructions for how to work with energy. I've never been trained. My uncle's an energy healer. He says there's one in every generation. I've met my uncle twice. And I was given instructions, literally a stick drawing with waves. Okay, move the energy here and say this prayer there, move the energy that way, say that affirmation there. And here's a script for a meditation. Go record it and go off and do a case study. And that's how my modality Connect to You was born. So here I am, just looking for volunteers. And my very first volunteer was a friend of mine that's a Reiki master. So I went to her space and she was not in a really good spot. She had some crazy legal issues going on and she was feeling like she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So there I am. And I had my little diagram. I do the first step, go back and check, do the next step, go back and check, and then hold the space while the meditation was playing. And then let it go. And it's like, okay, so how was that? She's like, oh my gosh, I feel fantastic. Like she felt so calm and centered in herself. So for the next 4 weeks, I asked my clients to check in with how they feel physically, emotionally, spiritually, and overall. And as she was doing that, she was starting to notice things were shifting with that whole legal issue. When we reconnected a month later, she said, yeah, that whole legal issue, it disappeared. The people confessed and realized that they were wrong, gave her money back, even more than what she was expecting, and it all cleared up. And then some other opportunities presented themselves, because she was connected to her true self. And I kept getting other crazy, amazing stories of what people were experiencing after they experienced Connect to You. So I was starting to step into who I really was. It was starting to give me the courage to share my intuitive gifts, to share my healing, and to share the insights that I was learning with others. It was a really important time for me. It still took time to truly come out of the closet. I mean, sure. Quite honestly, I didn't tell even my father-in-law until recently that I do intuitive meditation work because they don't get it. For my in-laws, my mother-in-law, I teach meditation. That's what I tell her. I think I've told her that I teach dowsing. So what I really focus on now is helping people to connect to their true selves, because when you keep questioning yourself, you can't find your path. Like, there's no way I could have guessed that this is what I would be doing. If somebody had told me before I went and surrendered that I would be doing intuitive work, I would have laughed at them. I wouldn't, because I didn't believe in it really myself.
Sure. And it's something that I think a lot of people, you know, they call it woo-woo or whatever. And I think that when you start walking towards the line, it becomes very, very blurry, because in the end, I mean, I think a lot of it is what we focus on, right? So if by doing intuitive meditations, you're focusing on what you want in life, or you're taking your focus off of the pain or the confusion or all of that stuff, and you're really connecting to your spirit. And I mean, if you read the book, and the whole, every stage of shift is about connecting to yourself, because until we can find our intuition and really hear that voice, that I really believe we all have that inner voice. It's just whether or not we've become so full of our ego or of worldly type things that we forget how to connect to it, how to listen to it. I mean, and I think a lot of us, you know, the way that we were raised could have chased a lot of it out, because we were told that whatever we were doing was wrong and that we had to do it this way, or that we, you know, from earning a paycheck to even, you know, what we chose to do for our life. A lot of it, we were told that our intuition was wrong. A lot of times, that we were, you know, I wanted to be a writer, and that's not possible, right? I mean, you need to earn a paycheck. You're going to starve as a writer. That's what I would hear. But, and the thing is, I mean, there's a million writers out there to prove me wrong, right? I mean, there's somebody out there writing books, and I think it has a lot to do with how we believe. And what I'm hearing is that you became open to one thing, and then and just like it does, I think it happens for a lot of people. If we look at the cycles of shift, is that something ain't right stage. That's kind of where you were with your health, with your nutritional type coaching. You were like, well, you know I want to help people, but I'm not sure that this is the thing for me. And then I think a lot of signs came into play, and that goes into the second stage. I call it honing in and honoring. And that's where we get really clear on what we want. We start getting really clear with that voice in our head that's telling us, you know, you may not see the big picture yet, but you know, this is the way I want you to go. And I think the biggest part about inviting shift is staying open to that voice and really curious about that voice. You know, what is that voice trying to tell me? Why is it trying to tell me this? And it doesn't always make sense. You know, like this year, I've been telling everybody I'm on a real huge trust journey, because I did give up some things that were making me financially wealthier to do things that I really, really wanted to do. And my intuition just keeps saying, just trust it, Christina. Yeah, you don't know where you're going or what exactly the master plan is, and that's okay. I think sometimes the master plan is so huge that the universe couldn't possibly hand it to us in one fell swoop, or else we would be overwhelmed, you know. I come to the example of like Albert Einstein. Like, could you imagine if in the beginning of his life, you know, there was this book of what he was going to do, and here, this is all the things that you're going to discover, you're going to learn, you're going to do in your lifetime. I mean, that would feel a bit overwhelming, but because he just followed his curiosity and his intuition, he was constantly falling into these things that people are like, oh, he's a genius. He's a genius. And in my mind, he was just very, very connected to that voice that said, okay, now this, okay, now this, and followed it. You know, I think so many times we can get those voices and then we go, well, I don't know, you know, fear is a big one. Just like you're saying, staying in the closet. I mean, because it's scary to be authentic sometimes when people don't understand what you're doing, or it seems like they're not even trying to have compassion or empathy for what you're trying to do or understanding. It's difficult to be that authentic. And so that's one of the things that we do. But I mean, thankfully, you were brave enough to follow that voice when you found it. And I mean, some people may question the way that you found it, you know, well, how do you know that meant that? And the thing is, each person has their own journey. And I really believe that our only job is to follow that journey. It's not to judge other people and how they follow their journey. That's their business, not ours. So all we have to do is focus on our journey. And I think that when we get bitter, it's because we haven't followed that journey. We've decided to do something else, or we've decided to let somebody else's limiting beliefs tell us what is and is not available for us to participate in. And then we lose our own voice. And I think, like, for me, I know my archetype of my magical little girl. My little girl gets really pissed off when I start giving up things that I really want to do. She's like, but I want to do that. I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I want to roll in the mud. I don't care. Like,
yeah.
You know, so I'm sure you had to follow a lot. I mean, it sounds like you had to follow a lot of those signs that maybe didn't make sense at first.
I have a crazy little story. When I was getting started with all of this and doing the automatic writing, I had a sheet of business card stock. You know how you can make your own business cards just with stock from Business Depot. So I had this sheet of business card stock appear on my desk. I had never seen it before. It was a beautiful kind of like pearlized, vellum-y kind of coating on it. It was gorgeous. And I'm looking at this, I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And the intuitive nudges, you're supposed to make business cards. It's like, no, I couldn't do that. And then that day I went to the spiritual store and this lady's looking at me saying, do you do yoga? Or like, do you teach yoga? It's like, no, I do yoga occasionally. She just kept looking at me. Well, we're going to be having this day where we have different practitioners come and they'll do mini sessions and you can come and enjoy. It's like, oh, well, I do automatic writing. She's like, oh, would you like to be a practitioner? Oh, sure, I'd love to. Well, do you have a card? And I didn't have a card to give her, did I? So that all happened within a few hours. And so crazy little things like that kept showing up. Mm-hmm. I have a plant that talks too. I know this sounds strange, but I have a plant that's on my desk. I used to have it upstairs next to where I meditated, and it moves. Like I can pull it away from the wall and it still manages to reach its branch out to the wall. And I hear the branches shifting and moving for confirmation. When I'm having a thought or I'm having a session with a client, it moves in confirmation. Like, yes, that is so. It's crazy.
Right. And I mean, I think that a lot of those things happen whether or not we pay attention. I think it's just that when we're really looking and in tune with our intuition, when we're really in tune with our intuition, we're open to seeing those more often. I think it's a huge thing, you know, and I think more of them happen because we're open to seeing them.
It's like, she's online. Okay.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, exactly. No, but I think it does because, you know, we always talk about how it rains, you know what I mean? When stuff happens, it all happens at once. And that's why, because I think that, you know, the universe is saying, oh my God, she's open to what's happening. Here, throw this all on her. Let's just get it out of the way real quick, you know, and maybe that's it. I'll have to be thinking of that every time that comes up now. It's like, hurry up, she's online. That's so good.
I see it like we're almost like secret agents. And we're just kind of offline, and until we put that earpiece in our head to start to recognize the signs. It's like, okay, the drop is over there, or you know, okay, now go to that corner of that room. And it's just about learning. It's being like a secret agent in your own life.
Right. And in that way, one of the things I've talked about before that I really, really love is Elizabeth Gilbert and her creativity, and how she talks about that genius that's outside of us, that it's not, that way it's not part of our ego. Our ego doesn't grow. Like when we do something wonderful, if we think it's, genius outside of us showing up and, performing with us, then it's not something that we take on for ourselves. One, we don't go into the negative going, wow, I'm responsible for all this and it has to be perfect. And no, our job is to show up and the genius will visit us or not. And I think that intuition is a lot like that. We have to show up to hear it. We have to sit in meditation, or we go to yoga, or however you're still and you hear your inner voice, whether that's writing or, journaling, whatever it is. If we don't take time to do that, it's just like not taking time to do the maintenance on our car, if you ask me. Something is going to break down, and that happens so much spiritually. And because it's something that we can't put a finger on all the time, I think it's one of those things that easily slip out of our sights. How do you commercialize spiritualism, right? Or being spiritual. I think that's one of the hardest things. If we could have a commercial that had like beautiful models walking down the runway going, hey, they got spirit, they got intuition, like how do we shift a culture where, to me, it's ridiculous that we care more about what's happening in the Kardashians' life than what's really going on in our intuition, or, what's going on about us. We don't learn so much about ourselves anymore. And I really love, I support what you're doing. I think that's awesome, because I think that if we could all connect to our intuition, the whole society as a whole would be completely different. It would have a completely different feel to it, if you will. Just because we wouldn't be so wrapped up in the money and the commercials that have stuff. It wouldn't be about stuff anymore. It would be about how we're going to move forward. And I think that's what's so important, especially in a political year. I voted today. So in a political year, like how we are moving forward together, rather than, how we can blame each other, or how we can make it us against them, and I think so much that it's that Michael Jackson song where you start with the man in the mirror, right? And so many of us don't want to do that because that's hard work. Why can't we just make other people change?
That's right. I have a small confession. I realized I was at a meeting this afternoon and I had my laptop and I didn't plug it in, and I see the battery's going down, so I'm going to let you continue chatting for a moment while I plug in. I apologize for that.
No worries. Yeah. And Michelle, you're welcome to jump in too if you'd like. Yeah. I think that spirituality is one of those things that we completely forget about. And we have to worry about our physical at some point, or because our body breaks down, and we can see that. Emotionally, we'll have a complete breakdown if we bottle up too much stuff for too long. And intellectually, we just crash, right? That's what happens, is all of a sudden we go stupid. But spiritually, I think, is so hard to forget about. So easy to forget about and just not attend to, because we think it's that religion part. And I know a lot of, especially Americans, have stopped going to church on Sundays, or don't go as much as when I was a child. And so they think that's all there is. It's religion or nothing. And I think that there's a big piece in there that's missing. You don't have to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, or an atheist. I think that's besides the point, the religious conversation. I think spirituality is more about who we are internally, and how we connect to whatever it is, like whether it's Gaia, the world, or all life, or God, or whatever that is. It's connecting to that piece that is, it doesn't change. Basically, it's what we hold sacred. Thanks, Michelle.
It's true, because everyone just calls some sort of higher power, if they believe in that, something different. And although it's got a different label, I believe it's all the same essence that's there. Yeah.
It's just that piece that we know is bigger than ours, than just our one piece. And I just think it's so important to find something sacred, whether you have religion or not. I mean, there's got to be things that you hold sacred, like my family time. I mean, there's certain things that I hold sacred because I want to know when it comes, and I do a huge, Michelle could probably tell you, I do a huge defining of words in my book, because I think that words are really important and not necessarily the connotations that we give them. Because like spiritual connection, you know, a lot of people are talking about how weird that is, right? Well, you're either religious or you're not. And spiritual connection actually means that we're binding to the seat of our moral fiber. And I don't see how that has to be religious. I think that everybody needs to have a binding to their spiritual connection or their moral connection, because if not, we have this world of people going around, you know, not caring about any of that stuff and sacrificing things for things that aren't sacred. And the act of sacrifice is to give up something that's not important for something that's sacred. And so if we're sacrificing our time and we're sacrificing our money or our happiness, I mean, are we sacrificing it for things that are sacred to us? And I think that what your path was is to find what was sacred to you and hold tight to it. And I think that that's so awesome that you were able to get all of these like little signs and little pieces. And it's such a really, really good example about how we're not shown the whole path at one time. You know, you didn't go to that first place and then they were like, oh, well, here's everything you're going to start teaching and learning. And I mean, you're probably still in the shift and in the fact that you're still learning new things and seeing how you can expand and grow. I mean, this isn't, sometimes people think that shift or transition is like you start here and you end here. And it's like, well, if you're talking about birth and death, that works. But not so much if you're talking about a shift. Like, when do we get there? Well, we never really get there, right? I mean, we always see another path. And the idea is to stay curious along the way, not to get there, just to remain open and curious about everything on our path. Is that what you would say?
Yes, the curiosity is really important, being open and surrendering.
Right.
You talk about sacrificing things that aren't really important to you. So it's like giving up attachment to those things. So I had to give up attachment to my business. And I witnessed that constantly in conversations with friends, with clients and colleagues. Like, you have to give up your attachment to that definition. You were talking about it earlier, how the world is supposed to be. When you can give up that attachment and just trust that there is something inside you that's guiding you, that you know there's something more. You can't put your finger on it. And so often for a lot of my clients, it's something that's kind of right under their nose, but they just never valued it. Like, it's something when you talk about it, you see them light up and you can see how it stirs something inside of them, but they never thought about, well, I would not be good at that. I could never share that with the world because I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z. But that's surrendering, to give yourself permission to dabble in that. So even if you're able to just do it part-time or just volunteering, like maybe you love to dance and you just start dance classes. That's huge. Just bringing dance in your day. Maybe that's what you need every day, is just to dance, and then you can do other things that you're really good at too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I mean, start as a hobby. It doesn't have to be like your end-all business or, you know, what you think you're going to be when you're growing up. I mean, I always say that, like, just because you're interested in baseball doesn't mean that you were meant to be a Major League Baseball player. Maybe you were meant to, you know, run the stadium, run the schedule, you know, run the website, run the team, you know, be a coach, be a batter boy, you know, whatever it is. You have no idea what that thing is. And it could be a million of those things. And the way to really enjoy it is just kind of shift through it. And I love how surrender is definitely it's a trust issue. I mean, and I find that one of the biggest things with surrendering is that if people don't trust themselves, they have a really hard time surrendering to what they don't know. And that is really the battle, is learning how to trust ourselves again, you know, because I know for me, I was like, oh, I trust myself. Of course I do. I know I'm going to do things and stuff. But then somebody was like, okay, so this situation comes along and you really want to do this thing for yourself, but now your kid needs this thing and blah, blah, blah. What do? Well, I give up the commitment to myself and I do that thing for my kid, which may or may not be the right thing, but that happens a lot. And when we start doing that, well, now I don't trust myself to take care of myself because I know that I'll give up that time for somebody else, or I'll do something else in that time. So I think that self-trust is a huge piece of being able to say, okay, no matter what happens, I can do this.
Well, if you think of, did you ever watch the movie Pursuit of Happiness?
Mm-hmm.
And the level of commitment that he had to have in order to see his dream, even though he wasn't making anything. Now, when I work with my clients, I often tell them, don't quit your day job just because you're curious in exploring this. Right. Because what I find is that if they quit their day job, they try to put their full focus on this new thing that they want to explore and grow. Well, they don't really know a lot about it yet, and then it puts so much stress and pressure on them to try to succeed that it constricts the energy. They're far better off staying with what they know. They can kind of go through the motions. They can still do that, and then just start to nurture their true passion on the side. And as it starts to blossom and build momentum, that's when you make the transition. Yeah. So there's less pressure. You're able to do it with ease, and it's just a way easier way to explore it. So even when I was faced with those two contract positions, I actually accepted the one job it was going to pay more, and it was my dream job that I had manifested. I accepted that job at first. My first day, I felt like throwing up, so I quit. And I told him. And he was totally okay with it. And then I accepted that other contract position. And I actually ended up playing with developing my spiritual gifts. So I was doing event planning, and I was organizing a fundraiser for a cause here in the community that I live in. And I was playing with dowsing. I was like, okay, so is today a good day to call this sponsor? Nope. Okay, is today a good day? And I had the best turnout. I had the most sponsors I'd ever had because I was playing with my intuition at my work and doing a better job. So I was bringing my newfound gifts into my day job and growing it there and building my confidence with it. So,
yeah. And I think that's a good point about constricting your energy. I know that, again, back to Elizabeth Gilbert, she says that, don't make your creativity pay your bills. Don't force it to do that, because when you start forcing the things that you love to produce, purposely, then you're taking a lot of the love out of it. You're taking a lot of the creativity and the fun out of it, because all of a sudden now it's got a purpose. And when we put that expectation on things, we suddenly have a completely different way that we go about them and the way that we think about them. They're no longer this thing that can develop organically. It's something that we try to force into this like funnel, and make it go down into the way that we want to do it. And I think that that's so important that we don't, we don't demand that out of the things that make us happy, or else they become so stressful that they're no longer fun. And then it's like, well, why am I doing this? And I mean, I did that when I left my job and I started working on my own business full time. I did that for 6 months because I was like, oh, I left, I gotta get going. And then like about 6 months later, somebody was like, well, you enjoy your life now, right? You're doing all the things that you want to do. And I was like, I actually had to think about it. Like, wow, do I? Because I'm feeling really stressed. And then I realized that I was forcing myself to do things that I didn't really want to do for money, or that really weren't my forte, because I just needed the money. And so I did some of the things that I wanted to do, but I did them in a way that wasn't me. It's hard to explain, but it wasn't for me. I was just doing it because I needed to produce, basically.
I understand. I totally understand. And I think that that's part of the journey too, because once you develop your confidence and what you do, so in 2011, when I started offering what I did and had this case study and I had like 40 volunteers, that was part of the developing of my confidence and building the confidence. Like, people really are interested in this. People really are seeing a difference in their lives. So you need to have that training ground, so to speak. And as your confidence grows and you believe in what it is that you do, then of course you can make abundant money at it. And then you also have the team to support you in doing so. So you get to focus on your genius and what's best that you do. And you let other people who are fantastic at marketing or fantastic at techie website development, and they get to do their genius. And when you get the right team together, what you can co-create is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on today. We're at about 50 minutes. So, yeah, that was really awesome because I think that it's so important. I mean, it was such a great, really example. I didn't set this up either, guys, of how, like, I think two things are really, really important throughout embracing transition is really taking care of ourselves as we go, and then also following that intuition, because intuition won't come out until, I mean, for me, my intuition is really small voice when I'm not taking care of myself physically, emotionally, or intellectually, or spiritually. It just shuts down and I can't hear it. I can go into crazy land and not be able to find it. So taking care of ourselves, I think, is so, so, so important in order to find that intuition. And then really making time to connect with it. I mean, and checking in with ourselves. How am I feeling now? It's one of the things I do often now is I work with an organization, Women Within, and we always do a 2-word check-in. So like several times a day, I'm like, okay, 2-word check-in. How am I feeling? Because when I'm on the computer so much and I'm working with clients, I can so get out of my body and just be, you know, in the computer. And then all of a sudden I'm not feeling how my body is, you know, reacting to what I'm doing. And suddenly I realize my shoulders are stressed like this, and I've been cramped like this all day. And I'm like, wow, I'm feeling stressed, you know, and then I can take care of myself. Am I feeling stressed? If I am, maybe I need a break. You know, am I feeling thirsty? Am I feeling hungry? Are my muscles sore? Do I need to stretch? And those things are all important, and they might be small things, but they're small ways. You know, I take 2 minutes a day to go, okay, how am I feeling and what do I need to do about it? It's a way that I'm reinforcing to my brain that my body is important, I'm important, taking care of myself is important. And I think that that's essential these days, because there's so many people who we feel, and I did this several years ago, you know, I felt like taking care of myself was such a load of garbage. You know, I was not taught to do that when I was growing up. It was all about production, see how much you can get done. You can eat later, you can take care of yourself later, you'll be fine, move on. Like, and so I never followed my intuition, and now I do, and it makes me, I mean, I feel really good about it. So so self-care is one. And then the second is just being open. You know, I heard you say that you weren't exactly, you know, into all this type of stuff, and you're not sure how you really would have felt about it maybe 10 years ago. But now you're like, wow, this is really working. So, I mean, just be open to how things can work. And if they don't work, fine, you know, drop them. You don't need to keep stuff that works for other people if it doesn't work for you. But just like Jennifer, she just kept her brain, you know, her mind open to it and said, well, you know, let's try it. You know, what's the worst could happen, you know? And then you got test subjects and you were like, let me really try this and let me really, you know, experience it or experiment with it and test it out. And I think no matter what that thing is, it may sound crazy, but, you know, somebody's got to invent the next big thing. I mean, the guy who put the pool noodle out, he put that out, and who knew he was going to make billions of dollars, right? But I bet he did. But I mean, we never know, you know, just because somebody tells you it doesn't work, or because even when we tell ourselves it won't work, it doesn't mean it won't. You know, there's ways to get there if you really, really want to, and you stay curious about it and just stay open to these signs like Jennifer had. You know, she had, sounds like you had like a million like little signs come from here, there, everywhere. And that's awesome, because it's just one way that we reinforce that, okay, this is good, I can trust this, you know?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's just, and they keep coming, right? It's just, they just keep coming every day. And there's times where it's like, okay, back off. And it's like, but I don't want to back off. All right. And then all this amazing synchronicities just weave themselves together that I could not have possibly predicted. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know you were going to show up, or you. Oh, okay, great. So
Yeah. So speaking of that, because I love that, because I think that anybody who tells you that they've pretty much figured it out is full of BS. Um, so what is it that you're looking to shift yet in your life, or that you're shifting currently?
uh, just continuing to deepen that trust
Mm,
and believing that I can do it. I was given a goal of inspiring 1 million people to connect
mhm,
with their soul. And there's times where I look at it, and there are moments when I just look at everything that I have to do and what's really going on. And it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. But then the very next thought that comes into my heart is, you know exactly what to do. And so it's not spending the time in the I don't know land, it's the let's get her done. And let's keep moving forward land. And sometimes that step for moving forward is that I need to take that time for self-care, or maybe that I need to focus on getting XYZ done and just like tune everything else out. But yeah, it's just deepening that trust. That is so huge.
that is, and I think that's one of those what I call those lifetime shifts, where we get bits of it and bits of it and bits of it, and it's just there's certain issues that we all have that are our life's work. I think that it's our job to continuously figure that out. And I say that just because there are some coaches who are like, oh, well, I've done this thing, I know how to do it, and it's, I got it all A, B, C, D. And it's different for everyone. Everybody's journey is a little bit different. So to say that you've figured anything out 100% for another person is hard for me. But I think that there's definitely a lot of tools that you can get from coaches or peers or mentors, or whoever that you are discussing your passion or your curiosity with. There's definitely tools that they all have. But the best mentors that I have and that I know that I trust are people who are still learning themselves. I mean, they may have 30, 40 years in psychotherapy and transition and shift, and they still are learning, because I think that there's so much out there that we don't know, that we are still questioning, like all this woo-woo stuff that sometimes we call it. It's a lot of stuff that we just need to be more open to it and just look into it. And like I said, if it doesn't work for you, don't use it. Move on and find the thing that works for you. Your intuition will tell you, you know. But yeah, what a perfect story for my first show since my book release. That was very exciting. Yeah, because I think that really covers it. I can tell you 10 years ago, I never would have thought that I would have been in health coaching or coaching at all, because I mean, I was having Pepsi and Doritos for breakfast. So I wasn't the best model of those things. And I think that that's how we do it. I never would have believed that I would heal myself with food rather than with medicine. Doctors, I was raised by a nurse. Doctors know what they're doing. They give you medicine and that's it. And I think that when your circumstances change, so will your beliefs. When my truth was not solving my circumstance, I had to find another truth. So I had to start being open and curious to other things. And for me, I took the pieces that worked for me and left what didn't. And that's what I really believe everybody should do. Everybody's intuition can tell them what's working for them and what's not. But I love all this. I'm going to have to learn a little bit about dowsing now. Are you having a workshop or anything?
I am, and actually, I'm just getting ready to release my training video on how to how to develop your intuition with dowsing and oracle cards. So I provide all the basics of how to get started with these tools, but also how you use that to listen to your intuition. What are the signs, and what are you going to feel as you start to use it? How do you use it to trust your intuition?
Very neat. Well, do you want to put your website in the messages there so that we can click on your website and get those updates when you release them?
Yeah.
Because interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, perfect. So we will do that. And if you have a Facebook page, feel free to throw that in there too. We'll all go visit it.
Sure.
But perfect. Yeah. I'm always looking for ways to make better decisions too. My mantra, Judy will laugh because she's in my circle, but my mantra is I make good decisions. So when I get that analysis paralysis, I just tell myself that, and I'm kind of the same way, like which one, and somehow I make a decision. I don't know how. I just go from the gut. I've always learned that going from the gut is a little easier for me
Absolutely.
than I try pro-con lists, but I really have to go with what I feel. So, perfect. So, yeah, well, thanks so much for being here. I'm going to stop the recording.